Today I'm making a classic beef tartare. It's fancy, it's Frenchy, and it's flippin' easy to make. Is it safe? Well, let's figure that out as we go along. Will it be delicious, or will I get hospitalized with food poisoning? Maybe both. Stay tuned to the end of the video to find out. Let's get adventurous. Steak tartare is a classic French dish enjoyed all around the world, but even though it's a little bit fancy, it's actually super easy to make. This dish gives you everything that you want from a perfectly cooked rare steak, but without the hassle or complexity of actually cooking a perfectly rare steak. At its core, this dish is some really finely chopped beef fillet, beautifully seasoned and with some tasty stuff mixed in. So before we get to the beef, let's talk about the mix-ins. These vary from recipe to recipe, and you can certainly swap any of these out to suit your preferences. But I'm starting with some finely diced shallots. For a single serve, I'm chopping up about 2 teaspoons worth. Next up, capers. These will give a lovely salty brininess, which will really brighten up the beef. Again, I've got about 2 teaspoons worth, and I'm finely chopping those and even giving them a bit of a smush with the side of the knife to get them almost to a paste-like consistency. Next, to add some acidity and sweetness, you'd normally add some pickled gherkins or cornichons, but I'm using some pickled jalapeños. They'll do the exact same job of adding that little bit of acidity and sweetness, but with a little bit of background heat too. But it's really about adding that acidity and sweetness. Really, any pickled vegetable that you've got would do just fine. And as with everything else, chop those as fine as you can and add them to the other ingredients. Next, to add some freshness and brightness, some flat leaf parsley. Chopped herbs can be fairly hard to measure by volume, but the amount that I'm going with will be roughly a tablespoon once it's finely chopped. And to get a nice fine slice, I'm layering the leaves on top of each other and then rolling them up tightly before slicing finely with a knife. This knife technique is called chiffonade, and it's a really great one to learn for finely slicing herbs. It gives you these really fine long strands, which I am then going to cross-cut to get all those long strands into teeny tiny bits. To bring all that together, I'm adding 2 teaspoons of a good extra virgin olive oil and 1 teaspoon of Worcestershire. Worcestershire sauce. Some recipes call for a dash or 2 of hot sauce, but given that this has already got some pickled jalapeños, I don't think we're going to need it. And then I'm simply seasoning that up with a generous amount of freshly ground black pepper and a 1/4 teaspoon of table salt. And now on to the star of the show, the beef. I'm using beef fillet for this, but it will also work with other lean cuts. Now, in terms of food safety and raw beef, just let me jump online and see what my local food authorities have to say. Okay, let's see. Salmonella, Listeria, Campylobacter, and E. coli. That doesn't sound like a good time. Generally not recommended. Okay, how to minimize the danger. Make sure the meat is very fresh, and only buy meat from a reputable butcher who understands how the meat is going to be consumed. Yeah, okay. This is totally from my local butcher shop and not at all from the supermarket. Okay, to be honest, this has come from the supermarket. Is that a bit risky? Yes. Would I recommend you doing this? No. Am I going to do it anyway? Yes. But hey, maybe the local food authorities are being a bit cautious. Let me check an international standard for a second opinion. Okay, here's an American website. Is it dangerous to eat raw or undercooked ground beef? Yes. May contain harmful bacteria, blah blah blah, should be cooked, blah blah blah, 71 degrees Celsius. Well, at least all the advice is consistent. I'm not in one of the at-risk groups, so I'm going to make this anyway, and I'll give you an update at the end of the video if I experienced any unpleasantness as a result. But I would recommend, if you're going to do this yourself, just go to the butcher and get a nice bit of fresh beef. Now, I've had my beef sitting in the freezer for about 20 minutes, so it's really cold and starting to firm up, but not frozen. This will A, help me to get really fine slices, and B, keep things cold to reduce the buildup of bacteria. And to start with, I'm trimming off all of the fat and any sinew. We really just want soft and tender lean meat. And I'm being pretty picky with this, but don't worry, those scraps won't go to waste.
Yeah, spin. Jake. High five. Yeah. Good job, bud.
By the time I'd finished trimming off the fat and sinew, this was about 160 grams of beef, which would be more than enough for one really generous serve. Then with a nice sharp knife, slice the beef as thinly as possible into strips. Once it's in strips, work in small batches to cut across the strips into a small dice. Once you've got it into a small dice, get stuck in with a knife and keep chopping until you've got a fine mince. If at any point you feel like the beef is getting a bit too warm, pop it back in the freezer for a few minutes to cool back down. Try and get it to a fairly even consistency if you can. When I was finished, this was about the size of most of the pieces of beef. Then I'm putting that into a chilled bowl to keep things nice and cool while I add the mix-ins. And then I'll mix until everything is thoroughly combined. Now, steak tartare is commonly served with a raw egg yolk mixed through, but for presentation purposes, and because the internet seems to love a gooey egg yolk, I'm saving my egg yolk to put on top at the end for presentation. Speaking of which, let's check out what the local food authorities say about eating raw egg. Let's see, large foodborne illnesses and outbreaks have been associated with foods made from raw eggs, including... Okay. What about the international advice? Let's see, USDA. Everyone is advised against eating raw or undercooked egg yolks, whites, or products containing them. Well, where's the fun in that? No, but seriously, even if you're perfectly healthy, there is a small risk that comes with eating this kind of food. But my immune system's pretty good, and today, it's a risk I'm willing to take. Now, you can plate this up as rustically as you like, just slop it on a plate and be on your way. But I'm feeling a bit fancy, and in typical YouTube fashion, I need to make this look good for the thumbnail, so I'm using a circle mold. And for this, really, any cylindrical object will do, as long as it's food safe and clean. So for mine, I'm placing a crumpet ring onto a chilled plate, again trying to keep everything as cool as possible, and then I'm filling that with the beef mixture, and pressing down to pack it in and make sure it's filled out all the way to the edges. Then I'm using my thumb to place a small divot in the middle, and that's where I'll balance the egg yolk. Then I'll carefully lift the ring mold off, gently slip the egg yolk on, and then to garnish I've got a nice little edible flower. It won't add much to the taste or texture of the dish, but it looks pretty, and I like it. And then, just as a little bit of final plate dressing, I'm adding a little drizzle of extra virgin olive oil, which in my head was going to give me nice little swirls of oil across the plate, like this, but in reality, gave me more of an oil slick, like this. So let's just rotate that so the good side is at the front, and readjust. And there we go. That doesn't look too bad. So now let's give this a taste. I'm trying to get a bite with a good mix of beef and egg yolk, and I think that's looking pretty good. And it's delicious. It's really beefy, just like a great rare steak, but that beefiness is complemented, balanced out, and perfectly seasoned by all those extra mix-ins, and the egg yolk just adds a richness which brings everything together beautifully. This is an absolutely fantastic dish, especially when you take into account that all you really have to do is chop things, and you end up with this beautiful, high-end, fancy dish that will impress just about anyone, at least anyone who's okay with eating raw beef and eggs. Oh, the bread! I forgot the bread! I specifically made a loaf of bread so that I could get a nice toasty slice, maybe rub a bit of garlic on it, and enjoy the beef tartare on that. But I completely forgot. Oh well, better late than never. Oh, and that is a great way to eat this. It gives it another layer of texture and gives you a really satisfying bite. The bread's also great for soaking up a little bit of that extra olive oil for a beautiful complementary flavour. If you're thinking you like your beef recipes a little bit more cooked, then check out this video next for a classic Aussie burger with the lot.
Sit. Good. Spin. Good boy. Shake. Good boy. High five. Good boy. Well done, Trooper. And
until next time, happy snacking.